Let's talk Sam Bennett in this video. Hi there, it's Brad Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And last week when the Calgary Flames took on the Montreal Canadiens, apparently it was in the second period, during the second intermission I should say, and one of the features on Hockey Night Canada, as Elliotte Friedman mentioned that apparently Sam Bennett was asking for a trade out of the Calgary Flames. So, do we think it's time for Sam Bennett to cut bait with him, as we drafted him in the first round, 4th overall back in 2014, and you would say up to this point he hasn't really exactly delivered on what he did back at the Kingston Frontenac days in the Ontario Hockey League when we drafted him 4th overall then. I mean, that draft, that was when Aaron Ekblad went 1st overall to the Florida Panthers, and then another Sam Reinhart, was the 2nd overall pick by the Buffalo Sabres, and then the Edmonton Oilers. Well, they definitely looking with glee on that draft now because they picked Leon Draisaitl 3rd overall, and then Sam Bennett was selected 4th overall by the Calgary Flames. And if you look at the scouting reports at the time and a lot of the pundits at the time, those were the 4 players that were likely going to be drafted in that for top 4 in the 2014 draft. It was debated on who was going to go first overall that draft because it was depending on who got that 1st overall pick. I think now in retrospect, you would probably safely say Leon Draisaitl would be drafted 1st overall, but it was actually scouted that Sam Bennett was the top skater with all these scouting reports. But all we heard about that at that time was that he couldn't do one freaking pull-up. But apparently it was because he had a banged-up shoulder, and he had to get his shoulder fixed during that 2014-15 season. But the big reason why there has been debate about Sam Bennett thinking that he would want to maybe get out of Calgary is not necessarily because he hates it here in Calgary, but he figures that maybe this would be a case that a change of scenery might do him well, because he most of the time, I mean, I think he has reinvented his game very well with the Calgary Flames, where he has been, more of that checking forward that we kind of looked at him when we drafted him, liking a Doug Gilmour, which you can say Doug Gilmour was one of the integral leaders of the Calgary Flames when we won the Stanley Cup. And I still say when we made the worst trade in franchise history when we shipped them off to Toronto, he definitely elevated his game a lot more, being that checking forward and, was in the running for Selke trophies. And Sam Bennett actually happened to be coached by Doug Gilmour when he was with the Kingston Frontenacs, and he is from Holland Landing, Ontario, so that's where he grew up and played his hockey. But he's been utilized a lot more as a bottom 6 forward. He isn't afraid to drop the gloves, but if you look at his career numbers, I mean, it's skewed a little bit right now. And then the fact that also after that trade, speculation rumors came out from Elliotte Friedman, and when either you got Elliotte Friedman or Dare Drager or Pierre LeBrun, all the big insiders, they say something, there's actually some merit to it as opposed to, I mean, I go on HockeyBuzz.com or see all these other rumor sites that sometimes you see these trade proposals that are put together without any thought in how it's going to work, especially in the salary cap world. But, I mean, Sam Bennett was a healthy scratch the last hockey game when we played the Winnipeg Jets to wrap up that road trip. And as of this recording, we're going to play the Edmonton Oilers in the Battle of Alberta. Well, he is in the projected lineup, but it doesn't say 100% definitive that if Sam Bennett is going to be in the lineup. It's a game time decision. I know the coach, Jeff Ward, for that Winnipeg game, said that it was his decision because if you look at his stats right now, as of this recording for the 2020-21 season, in 9 games he only has 1 assist and a -5. And overall in his NHL career, all with the Calgary Flames obviously, he has played 373 NHL games. He has scored 63 goals, 66 assists for 129 points. However, his plus-minus is -58. And then the other thing that's also very, very intriguing with Sam Bennett is that if you look at his career stats, I mean, after when we drafted him in 2014, he actually did get to play one NHL game in the 2014-15 season right after that draft and going into the playoffs. He had an assist, and is actually his best offensive numbers, which looks like what kind of lines up to what you could probably project Sam Bennett right now as an NHL, what he can give you, especially if he is somewhere else. That in the 2015-16 season, which would have been his rookie season, after he was with the Flames with the playoff run, and we'll go over the playoff numbers, which makes it a very intriguing piece to potentially trade, that in 77 games in the 15-16 season, he had 18 goals, 18 assists for 36 points, and it was a minus 11. And since then, he hasn't been close to reaching that because he had 26 points for 13 goals in 16-17. And then 17-18, he had 11 goals and 26 points. And then 18-19, in 71 games, he had 13 goals for 27 points. And then last season, when he played 52 games, he only had 8 goals for 12 points. And then as of this season, he only has played 9 games with that 1 assist. But in the playoffs, he has proven that he can deliver in the playoffs, which definitely gives that, do we hang on to him for this season and try to work things out, or could he be benefit with a change of scenery to potentially get more playing time? Because in the playoffs, in the 2015 Stanley Cup playoffs, where the Calgary Flames defeated the Vancouver Canucks in the first round and then bowed out to the Anaheim Ducks in 5 games. In 11 games, and this is after he played that 1 game with the Calgary Flames at the end of the season, then he was working on getting his shoulder fixed in between. In 11 games, he scored 3 goals, 1 assist for 4 points in those 11 games that the Flames were in the playoffs. And then the next time the Flames were in the playoffs was in 2017. That was when we had that very brief cameo with the Anaheim Ducks when we were swept in the first round. He had 2 goals, and we were outplayed in those tight games against the Anaheim Ducks. And then in the 2019 playoffs, where we had another brief cameo with the Colorado Avalanche, and Sam Bennett was actually one of the few players that you could say stood out for the Calgary Flames and showed up. In 5 games, he had a goal and 4 assists for 5 points in the 5 games, and 16 penalty minutes. And then last season, if you include the play-in series with the Winnipeg Jets, where we finished them off in 4 games in the best of 5, and then we bowed out to the Dallas Stars in 6 games. In 10 playoff games, he had 5 goals, 3 assists for 8 points. So in 30 Stanley Cup playoff games, he has 11 goals, 8 assists for 19 points. So his offensive production is a lot better in the playoffs than he has shown in the regular season. So that definitely is going to skew. Like, if we were to shop Sam Bennett, and I'm going to say right now, unless things get sour, like, say, Pierre-Luc Dubois situation, and we'll talk about that trade as well, that I think it's best right now. And even Sam Bennett kind of said that about, being asked about all these rumors, that he just said he's going to keep it between the Flames and the general manager and just play on the ice when he is given the opportunity. And much of the time, as I say, he has been in the bottom 6, because I think if you look at the Flames roster, we have a solid top 6, and it seems like when Sam Bennett has been in the top 6, he hasn't, developed or produced as much, but this is also his 7th season in the NHL. And then when you look at the contract, I mean, he is at the end of his contract where he was going to get paid just over $2.5 million, and he will be a restricted free agent. And other pundits say that when you project potentially the Seattle Kraken expansion draft, that Sam Bennett was likely going to be the casualty. But who do we potentially trade because I think this might be a case where I think Sam Bennett may benefit from a change of scenery to go somewhere else to maybe get more of an opportunity, and that happens with some players. I mean, I know that going back to one of my inspirations to be more active on YouTube as the hockey guy, he actually made a video where he compared Sam Bennett, and another player that he compares it to is Jake Virtanen. Jake Virtanen plays with the Vancouver Canucks. He's another player that, it's like they like him as an asset, but it's like they're waiting for him to get that extra step. And that's kind of the same thing with the Calgary Flames. I know that Jake Virtanen would be sort of a homecoming if, let's say, we acquired him when it comes to maybe a potential trade, because he did play his junior hockey with the Calgary Hitmen. But unlike Sam Bennett, Jake Virtanen, he didn't produce in the playoffs, so, and it'd be just a little messy to make a trade in division. But if we were to trade Sam Bennett, we would have to factor in COVID restrictions, because if we make a trade and we want an asset right away, it's going to have to be within division in the North All-Canadian Division. Because if you go back to that Pierre-Luc Dubois and Patrick Laine trade, well, Patrick Laine actually just recently made his debut with the Columbus Blue Jackets after he got traded out from the Winnipeg Jets. And the trade happened 2 weeks ago as of this recording, because Patrick Laine had to wait 7 days before he can clear to join the team. And then when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois making his debut with the Winnipeg Jets, it's not expected that he's going to make his Jets debut with the Winnipeg Jets until they play the Calgary Flames next Tuesday. So that's 2 weeks out, so that's something you have to factor in. But other rumors you've been hearing about Sam Bennett is the fact that apparently the Toronto Maple Leafs, they might be interested in acquiring his services. I mean, it'd be closer to home for him, because he's from Holland Landing, Ontario, and actually see his birthday is June 20th. He was born in 1996. So he was born on the last day to be a Gemini, and of course I got to put that plug in, that Gemini's rule, right? But if Sam Bennett, let's say he went closer to home and got traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think he'd be in the same situation that he is right now with the Calgary Flames, because I'm going to say the top 6 for the Toronto Maple Leafs is a lot more top heavy. I mean, it would be a trade right away that both sides would be able to get an asset right away, because they don't have to worry about travel quarantine restrictions. But I've also looked online before I recorded on Puck Pose that a couple other teams that may potentially be interested in Sam Bennett's services could he be willing to go to a rebuilding team? Because they mentioned the Detroit Red Wings. I mean, they're a team that he would definitely fit in their top 6 right now and provide more of a physical presence, and who knows, could he get rejuvenated with a change of scenery? And then they also mentioned the New York Rangers, and there's some caution with that as well, because the New York Rangers are also been in the news recently, and apparently the Calgary Flames have been interested in Tony DeAngelo, and I'm going to say back away from that, because the reputation he has, and I don't think it would make sense to bring in Tony DeAngelo, and plus he's a defenseman, and I'm going to say the Calgary Flames are pretty good with their top 6 right now in defense, and don't want to bring in some extra baggage and a headache. And then, of course, factor in the COVID restrictions and travel, that unless they were able to expedite, get permission from the government, and I already brought up the Pierre-Luc Dubois and Patrick Laine trade, that the Winnipeg Jets, are still had to wait over 2.5 weeks to get Pierre-Luc Dubois in the lineup. And, I mean, what do you think about Sam Bennett? I mean, I would still like to have him around with the Calgary Flames. I accepted the role that he has with the Calgary Flames. I mean, I don't anticipate anything about him being disgruntled and absolutely want to get the heck out of Calgary as soon as possible. But at the same time, I can see his other side of the argument about, maybe he wants to go somewhere else to get a change of scenery and maybe it would benefit his career. I mean, it's kind of hard to compare sports with real world, but I know in my personal experience, I know after when I graduated from college, it definitely worked out for me when I had a change of scenery 10 years ago, just to go somewhere else to be utilized differently and just be around a different group of people. And that happened to me personally as well, but I mean, I don't sense anything. And I know that Jaron Drager also talked about that the Flames are in no rush to trade him. And I think unless something gets very, very sour, unless he starts getting scratched, consecutive games in a row, despite the fact that the Flames have some injuries and call up some players from Stockton, that unless he demands to get out, unless he puts in a lackadaisical effort from that we saw from Pierre-Luc Dubois, and I don't sense that here in this case, I think it's worth hanging on to him and maybe trying to work things out. I mean, at worst case, maybe work out a deal with the Seattle Kraken when you figure out who you protect, and left exposed that you have to take Sam Bennett in the expansive draft, because looking at options out there, I mean, everyone's going to look at the fact that he was a top 4 draft pick in the 4th overall, and then looking at his numbers and say that you could say he's a bust, but he's a good everyday NHLer and reinvented his game. I mean, what kind of realistic return can we get? I mean, some say, well, why don't we trade Sam Bennett for Jake Virtanen? And I would say no for that, just because of looking at playoff performances from both players. I mean, and the fact it's the Vancouver Canucks divisional rival. Toronto Maple Leafs, I mean, it could make sense for him because he'd be closer to home, but I don't think he would get any more opportunity being in the top 6 with Toronto, definitely compared to Calgary. I heard that maybe someone said maybe a Zach Hyman. I mean, other than that, would he be willing to go to Ottawa? If Ottawa's interested, I could see him get a top 6, or Detroit, you know, wanting to go through some growing pains and rebuild. I mean, he was kind of here towards the end of the painful rebuild when the Calgary Flames decided to blow things up. Especially decided to move on from Jerome McGinley, trade out Bill Ballmeister, and Kipper retired. I mean, now I think we're in that contender status, but I just say right now, I mean, unless it gets sour or really ridiculous, where he gets scratched for a week and gets favored over, you know, other veterans or younger players that aren't as good, I just think it's time to try to keep on to him. There's no hurry. I mean, he's a restricted free agent after this season, and might be easy to send him to Seattle, or I just don't think there's a trade right now that makes sense, unless he's packaged with something else. But I just say, what do you think? I mean, give my various takes and thoughts on the situation. I know, going back to the Elliotte Friedman when this first started, that apparently Sam Bennett said he wanted to go out. Well, he has the same agent as Victor Mete, who plays for the Montreal Canadiens, and both general managers, Mark Bergevin and Brad Treliving, kind of almost felt that was news to them, that they first heard about. It makes it sound like that they first learned about it at the same time that myself and many other hockey fans learned about this. But we just had this interesting debate with Sam Bennett this whole time since we drafted him. I mean, he is the highest draft pick that the Calgary Flames have ever made, and I mean, he hasn't exactly panned out from what he showed in junior. I mean, he does have that potential to pot in the odd goal, isn't afraid to get, you know, rough, and I would say you would still expect him to at least give you 20 goals and 40 points, and he did show that in his rookie season, and it hasn't been since then. But what do you think? I mean, would Sam Bennett actually benefit from a change of scenery? Or what should the Flames do, and what realistically can you get for him right now, what he's showing with the Calgary Flames somewhere else, if he's going to be a top 6 forward, and what can we get back in return? Especially that he is still a younger but a very proven veteran, and is still going to be a restricted free agent after the season. So what do you think? Give me my thoughts. So anyways, I like to say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, and I felt eventually I just had to make a video talking about Sam Bennett, or Benny as we also like to call him here as well. And you know, I like him in the lineup. I don't sense any issues with him, but you know, I could see his other side, that maybe he could use a change of scenery. Just, you know, sometimes that happens in our careers all in general as well. I also do a variety of non-sports content, like personal vlogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do share my experience with him on the road or a sporting event. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, you know what you do, just make sure you like, subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below, and now that, you know, games are happening right now with the Calgary Flames, I do my Calgary Flames game recaps. So after the next 6 games, when Calgary gets their 12 games into the season, I'll be back with another episode recapping games, and I guess I will talk a little bit about Sam Bennett in that next episode, both of this rumor and the fact that he's scratched, and, you know, if he's back in the lineup. Haven't mentioned him too much because he only has that 1 assist, and he hasn't done anything outrageous, both good and bad. So we'll see. And of course, if a trade does happen, I mean, I'd talk about the trade and definitely give my feelings on it if he gets traded anytime soon. But we'll see. This situation can change pretty quickly. I mean, it was a lot more obvious that Pierre-Luc Dubois, for example, was very disgruntled and unhappy with his situation in Columbus, and it really turned sour. And then same with Patrick Laine with the Winnipeg Jets, because he wanted to get more playing time, and that kind of made that trade. And I made that video on that trade just both as a hockey fan and the fact that the Calgary Flames were apparently in the sweepstakes for Pierre-Luc Dubois as well, and maybe Sam Bennett could have been thrown in that hypothetical trade as well if we were to win the sweepstakes. So I'll just say, go Flames go, and I'll see you in the next video, and we'll see if there'll be another Sam Bennett video anytime soon about if the situation gets more sour, or if indeed he gets traded, or maybe things will work out and he'll sign a long-term extension. Who knows? So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.